The betrayal of Joseph. How a dreamer was sold into Egypt. Part 1. The favored son and the seeds of resentment. In the ancient land of Canaan, a young man named Joseph walked a precarious path, one paved by both privilege and peril. At just 17, he was already marked by distinction, not for his own accomplishments, but because of his father's unabashed favoritism. Jacob, the patriarch of the family, had many sons, but it was Joseph who captured his heart. Why? Perhaps because Joseph was the firstborn of Rachel, the wife Jacob had truly loved. Or perhaps because Joseph carried himself differently than his brothers, with an air of intelligence, perhaps even destiny. To signify his special status, Jacob gifted him a magnificent tunic, a coat of many colors. A garment like this was no mere piece of clothing. It was a symbol of status, a sign that Jacob saw Joseph as more than just another son. It set him apart, elevating him above his brothers in both favor and rank. But in doing so, Jacob unknowingly sowed the seeds of jealousy. The other sons of Jacob, hardened by years of labor and the demands of a nomadic life, looked upon Joseph with growing resentment. Why should he, the pampered one, receive such an honor while they toiled in the fields? Did their father not see them as worthy? And then, Joseph began to dream. Part 2. Dreams of greatness or delusions of arrogance. Joseph's dreams were not the ordinary flickers of an idle mind. They carried significance, images layered with meaning, symbols of power, submission, and fate. One morning, he eagerly shared his first vision with his brothers. "Listen to this dream I had," he said, perhaps unaware of the anger simmering beneath their silence. "We were binding sheaves of grain in the field, and suddenly, my sheaf stood upright, while all of yours gathered around and bowed to it. The reaction was immediate. 'Do you actually think you will reign over us?' One brother scoffed. 'Will you truly rule us?' Another added, his voice sharp with irritation. Their hatred deepened. Joseph was not just favored. Now he was proclaiming his dominance over them. Whether he was simply sharing what he saw or subtly boasting, the effect was the same. His brothers could barely stand the sight of him. Yet Joseph was not finished. Days later, he recounted another dream, one even more audacious than the first. In this dream, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars all bowed before me. Even his father, Jacob, who had once indulged his beloved son, furrowed his brow. "What are you saying, Joseph? That your mother, your brothers, and I will bow to you?" Jacob rebuked him, but deep inside he wondered. Could there be something divine in these dreams? Or was Joseph simply an arrogant young man, blind to the effect of his words? Had Joseph considered how his brothers felt, being told, again and again, that he was destined for something greater? Or was this all part of a plan far beyond his understanding? Part 3. The plot against Joseph. One fateful day, Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers, who were tending their flocks near Shechem. As he approached, his brothers saw him from a distance, his colorful robe unmistakable against the dusty landscape. And in that moment, their frustration boiled over into something darker. "Here comes the dreamer," one muttered, his voice dripping with contempt. "Let's kill him," another suggested. "We'll throw him into a pit and tell father that a wild animal devoured him." It was a brutal plan, but to them it made sense. If Joseph was gone, so were his dreams. But not all of them were eager for bloodshed. Reuben, the eldest, saw an opportunity to prevent the worst. "No," he interjected. "Don't kill him. Just throw him into this empty pit. That way, we won't shed his blood." His plan, unspoken to the others, was to return later and rescue Joseph. But fate had a different course in mind. Part 4. Sold for silver. Joseph arrived, unsuspecting. Perhaps he believed that, despite their hostility, his brothers would welcome him as family. Perhaps he thought that the weight of their resentment was not enough to lead them to true betrayal. He was wrong. Before he could react, they seized him. His magnificent robe, his father's precious gift, was ripped from his body. He cried out, but they ignored his pleas. Without ceremony, they hurled him into an empty cistern, a deep pit where no water remained. Was this where his story ended? As the brothers sat down to eat, satisfied with their cruelty, a caravan appeared on the horizon. Midianite traders on their way to Egypt, their camels loaded with goods. And in that moment, Judah, one of the brothers, saw an opportunity. What profit is there in killing him? He reasoned. Let's sell him instead. He is our brother after all. For 20 pieces of silver, the price of a slave, they sold their own flesh and blood. What went through Joseph's mind as the Midianites bound his hands and led him away? Betrayal? Anguish? Did he still believe in his dreams? Or did he wonder if they had all been meaningless? Did he cry out for his father? Would anyone come for him? Part 5. The deception of Jacob. The brothers now faced another problem. What would they tell their father? They could not admit the truth, so they devised a cruel lie. Taking Joseph's robe, they slaughtered a goat and soaked the fabric in its blood. When they returned home, they presented it to Jacob. "We found this," they said. "Is this your son's robe?" Jacob's heart shattered. "It is my son's. A wild beast has torn him apart." Grief consumed him. He tore his garments, wrapped himself in sackcloth, and wept bitterly. No one could comfort him. His son, his beloved Joseph, was gone, or so he believed. Part 6. A New Life in Egypt. While Jacob mourned, Joseph's story was far from over. Bound and broken, he arrived in Egypt, a land of towering pyramids, bustling marketplaces, and rulers who wielded power like the gods. There, he was sold to Potiphar, a high-ranking officer of Pharaoh. Joseph had lost his family, his home, his freedom. Everything he had known was gone. And yet, was this the end of his story? Or was it only the beginning of something greater?